think it's difficult because I don't think you could talk about loving without attachment without talking about the attachment styles. And that stood out to me when you were talking about, a relationship should, I guess, reduce your anxiety or, there shouldn't be anxiety if you're in a healthy attachment or loving without attachment. But the reality is that a lot of us don't what we call secure attachments. And so any relationship might stir up some element of anxiety if you don't rectify the things that happen in your past that shape how you navigate your relationship. So I guess to take a step back, for those of you who don't know, psychological theory called attachment theory. So basically it's saying that how your needs were met or were not met as a child, that's going to shape the way you navigate all of your relationships, especially your romantic ones. So if your parents were consistently there, they catered to your needs, they showed you affection, you're likely to have what's called a secure attachment, which is good, right? You're approaching relationships from a place of trust. You can build intimacy with people, but you also can maintain your independence so you're not codependent on people. That's kind of like the goal for how you want to be in your relationships. Fortunately, many of us don't fall within that category. Maybe you had childhood trauma, your parents might have been inconsistent, whatever happened in your childhood, or even sometimes in adolescence or early adulthood, that can shape you in what's called an insecure attachment. And so there's like different breakdowns of that, right? So insecure attachment, you're kind of weary when it comes to intimacy, love, communication, just being vulnerable with people. But then there's different facets of that too, right? So you have secure and then you have insecure attachment. But then within insecure attachment, there's like three different umbrellas. So you have what we call the avoidant people. Those are the ones who like fear commitment, right? The ones who are just emotionally detached. And then you have the people who are anxious. So they're super clingy and they want to hold on to a commitment no matter what. It's actually interesting because people who tend to be like clingy and, wanting a relationship codependent, they tend to gravitate toward the avoidant people, right? So you often find out I'm chasing after this guy who's emotionally unavailable. There's a reason for that, right? It ties to the attachment theory. And then you kind of have a combination of both of those. So people who are avoidant, they fear love. It's like, I don't really like this, but they also crave love at the same time. And it's kind of like a push and pull dynamic.
Yeah.
So that is unfortunately, I'm not gonna say unfortunately because it's something I work through, but that's the one that I resonate with the most. But that would be more of like a fearful attachment style. So I would say, if you feel like you have issues again with intimacy, communication, just being vulnerable, trusting people, look into that because it could be a sign that you have that insecure attachment style.
Yes, I love that you broke it down because sometimes I forget. I'm just like, okay, this is secure, avoidant. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes I kind of get in the mix. So I think I read the book about 2 years ago, maybe, just to get some clarity for myself. And so because I was kind of in between. I'm like, wait a minute, like, I love my wife, I love my family, but by default, I'm a loner and I'm an introvert. Like, I don't, my mom even laughed at me today. She's like, you doing all these interviews, you talking to people. She's like, you wouldn't say two words when you were younger. And so I just I like to fall back a lot. I don't know. So I guess I'm kind of in between, like secure and maybe avoidant. I don't know. I'm kind of struggling with that.
I feel like an introvert is a little bit different because it's like, you will talk to people as you do, but sometimes you need your time to recharge. The avoidant person is just a person who is like, they really have a resistance to intimacy. So they might be the ones who view romantic relationships and they're like, nah, that's not for me. I'm gonna be in the streets. Like, I don't want to get close to people. No, don't fall in love with me, right?
Mm.
Really. So that would be more of the avoidant tendency. So I mean, I don't know. Of course, you can identify whether or not it's tendencies within yourself, but if that's not really a challenge for you, I don't know if I would say you being introverted is avoidant.
Yeah, that gives a little clarity because I'm like, I will check out on everybody in the New York minute and I'm done. But that's another time, I guess. For someone healing from childhood trauma, how does attachment show up in their relationships? And what steps can they take towards a healthier version of love?
I think you'll see it the most in trusting, right? So whether it be trusting that the person's intentions are pure, trusting that what they say is the truth, just being able to, I guess, lead with trust. Something came to mind, and I'm like, this is probably the best way to explain it. There's some people who are like, I start off with trusting people, and then I watch their actions, and depending on how they move, then that trust might dwindle. Then you have people who are like, don't start out trusting anybody. Like, I'm super cautious and I'm super guarded of everyone. And you have to earn my trust along the way. The
Mhm.
latter, I think that is probably going to be more tied to traumas and things in the past. And that's one of the ways that it shows up in those insecure attachment styles.
Mhm.
So I think, just things like that, being able to articulate how you're feeling. Some people struggle with, and I'm included, with being able to recognize how you're feeling in a moment, but then explain why. Okay, I'm sad, I'm anxious right now. Why am I feeling this way? Like, why am I nervous about getting to know someone? Being able to articulate that is something that people might struggle with too. And then, just that vulnerability piece, putting yourself out there to love someone, knowing that you might get hurt, but trusting that it won't happen, but also trusting that you'll be okay if it doesn't work out, right? I think those things are areas that might be triggering or that people might struggle with if you're dealing with childhood trauma.
Mhm.
The way to get over it, I mean, for me, a lot of it is just self awareness, realizing those things within myself. I'm very much a why person. I ask the why of everything. And so I like to trace back, okay, this makes me nervous. Why am I feeling this way? Okay, once I pinpoint what happened in my life that is making me react in this way, then I can try to kill that. And then I will always be an advocate of therapy. So if you can't figure it out on your own, just talk to a therapist and then figure out things that you can do to really just kind of trust your intuition versus falling on fear when you're getting to know someone. And really just kind of talk yourself through those negative thought processes that you have.
Yeah, because those negative thoughts, I mean, they'll be there. They waiting for you.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta tell yourself, like, literally, I'll have a thought, and it probably is an irrational thought. So you have to tell yourself, okay, what is your justification for feeling this way? If you can't come up with a reason why you feel that, and just like something that people do too is like if you have a fear of a situation, okay, what if it goes wrong, right? I know it's not good to think about, but okay, if this doesn't work out, what's going to happen? Like, am I going
Yeah.
to stop breathing tomorrow? Will I be okay? Right. So once you kind of talk yourself, okay, if it doesn't work out the way that I want to, what will life look like for me? You're still going to be okay. Things might be painful, but you can still move forward. And just having those conversations with yourself can help ease some of your fears too.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, because I remember being in marriage class. Matter of fact, I had one of my mentors on a couple of weeks ago, and just like we talk about the attachment styles and stuff. There's a book called "The Mindful Marriage," and even though it says mindful marriage, I believe every person, single, divorced, whatever your status is, I think everybody should read this book because he talks about these 4 steps and it helps you with regulation. And when you say the four are I feel, and you fill in a blank, whatever that is, I feel. Usually whatever you do, usually what do you do when you get into arguments or you're dysregulated? I fall out, I abandon, I leave, Truth of the matter is, what's the truth of the matter? The truth of the matter is I'm fearful or I feel rejected, or I feel alone. And then the fourth one is next time I will, whatever that is. Next time I will be connected. Next time I'm not going to leave just because it got hot in the kitchen. Right. And so when you go over these 4 steps, they help you to regulate and opposed to just being in dysregulation and arguing and falling out and getting into it with your spouse because you're not getting along. But when you both are on the same page about that, it just kind of helps bring things down some. But you got to be able to walk yourself through this process. A couple of minutes, especially when you get really good at it. So when my wife and I fall out, usually, we get to it. I'm just like, I feel, and when we know that, then we know
Yeah.
we're in that mode now. So all of a sudden, the temperature kind of changed because it's never you and you always in that whole thing, so when you start doing that, you're always in you, that's when people get defensive. And the conversation usually goes south because you're just constantly pointing the finger. So
Makes you take a second to pause and think before you speak. I think that's the biggest thing when things go downhill. I've had to learn that within myself. It's like I have a rule where if I'm like, I try to abide by this. If I'm super emotional, it's like, okay, don't speak yet. Just process what you're feeling and then speak on it. So if you take that moment just to take a breather, it kind of relates to what I say are like the 3 A's. So awareness, accountability, and an action. So like your awareness is I'm feeling this way. Accountability, all right, usually I do this, and then action, I'm gonna do something in a healthier manner. So I like that. Yeah. I have to add that to my repertoire. Thank you.
Yeah, no, for sure. So are you the type that you will go off, or do you kind of cry, or do you just really take time to go back and process? Like where are you at that stage of your life right now?
I think I am a mixed bag. So what I will say is that when it comes to conflict, I do tend to be more of an avoidant person, and that's something that I'm having to work on within myself. So I'm typically the person who's like, okay, can we just give me a second to talk about this later? Like I need to process my emotions because I know that if I try to speak in that exact moment, it might not come out in the best way. But I also understand that can be frustrating for some people when they're like, okay, but I want to talk about it now, right? And so it's kind of figuring out that in between. So sometimes if, my boyfriend is telling me something, I'm like, okay, I'm just processing what you're saying right now. Like give me a couple seconds and then I'll respond. But it's hard. I think, to sum up the answer, I tend to be more of an avoidant person because I know that if I'm not, I tend to be like, just kind of saying what's on my mind. It's not always the best thing to do. Work in progress.
No, no, I'm with you because I struggle in that area too, but I realized over time how much damage that was doing to me internally and even in my marriage, right? And so, now my wife and I mean, we just don't let daggers fly, but we just put everything out on the table and we can talk with decency, without having to, go all off the handle and stuff like that. Like you can say what you need to say. And I realized too that came from me not having a voice as a child growing up.
Yes, yes. I think for me, my family, like there would be conflict, but kind of passive aggressive conflict, right? So somebody made somebody mad and we're not talking about it, but I'm not speaking to you. And I might say something mean under my breath or something like that. So learning how to kind of talk through those uncomfortable feelings, that's something that I've had to learn as an adult because I didn't really see that, as I was growing up.
Hmm. Yeah, so I'm with you. So it was something I had to learn in therapy. And over time, my wife and I, because my wife, she'll tell you, and so we had to get to a place where it's like, okay, let's talk about this where we are both being heard, opposed to, all right, I ain't gonna say nothing now, I'll wait till later kind of thing. It's like, no, let's just deal with this now. Because I was going to ask you about this real quick since we here. How long do you think someone should hold off to process their feelings before you actually get back into having that conversation? I mean, not like you got to put a minute on it, but like, is it 15 minutes? Is it
How
the
long
next
is it?
day?
I don't think I kind of have two minds here because I know a lot of people say you shouldn't go to bed angry. And to a certain extent, I do agree with that because one, I think things will fester overnight. But something that happens
Mm.
with me is I'll feel something very strongly in the moment. And then the next day comes and I'm calmed down, which is good, right? But the downside to that is that I still felt strongly about that, but now it's probably minimized when I'm talking to you about it. So I'm not recollecting things the way that they actually happened and how I felt in that moment. I think the best thing is probably like if you need a break, go outside, take a walk, 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, regroup. But I think the longer you let things delay, especially like the next day, the chances of you actually having a fully transparent conversation where you're actively recollecting what happened, how you made each other feel, that kind of dwindles.
Yeah, because I'm kind of torn in between the two, right? I'm kind of torn because, and I know we kind of got off topic, but I think this is important because one part of me says I get it that you need to self regulate, but then the other half of me is like it's almost like being in a heavyweight fight, and then they ring the bell and you go to your corners, but now you got time to really think like, "Ooh, I could have got him right there." Ooh, he said what? Ooh, I could have killed him on that one. You know what I'm saying? So now you come back in the ring and it's almost like you got a new case on your hands because you were actually able to kind of go through some things. So I'm kind of torn in between the two, but I guess you have to do what works best for you, right?
Saying that it kind of makes you in a way be more combative where it's like I'm going into it with the intent to win the argument versus finding a resolution.
Yeah. Yeah, because the thing about relationships is, when one person wins, the relationship loses ultimately, so that's the downside of it. How can someone practice non-attached love without seeming cold or disconnected?
I think a lot of it, and this is just kind of like the Buddhist perspective, a lot of it is focusing on mindfulness and focus on your inner well being. Meditation is something that's big. And really just kind of cultivating a state of peace within yourself because when you're happy within yourself, you're not as likely to cling on to other people and feel like you need to seek other people or things outside of yourself to feel whole and happy. So the biggest thing is just figuring out how you can find inner peace within yourself. And that looks different for some people. Maybe it is you having your own life, right? Maybe not being so enmeshed with someone that you're involved with where you do everything together, but you have your own set of friends. You like doing things on your own. You value your own time, where it's like the person is complimenting you. You don't need them to make you whole.
Yeah, yeah, because sometimes, when you talk about say like love languages and stuff like that and say like words of affirmation, it's easy to sometimes get like, okay, is my love language being words of affirmation? It's like, I know I'm that dude, but I still like to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's like that's cool, but yeah, I know, but you know what I'm saying? You could still tell me. How does our sense of self worth play into whether we love from a place of freedom versus a place of clinging?
I got interrupted your question because I was asking you like what I guess like what your thoughts are on that, especially coming from the perspective of a married person. Like how do you feel you're able to kind of center yourself, so to speak, so that you're not loving from that place of like, I need to be attached. If that takes you
Yeah.
off topic, please feel free to go on to the next question. But I'm just curious to know.
No, this is a great question, and let me know because there's so many places I can go with this. I think there's a level of interdependence. I mean, looking at it from this perspective, it takes a lot of work, but I think interdependence helps makes a marriage stronger. Not codependent, but it's like we are these two. It's like a merger, kind of thing, but not codependent. I think it's a difficult balance. I think it can be challenging. I think when we live our relationships on autopilot, that's when it can become dangerous. But I think if we're mindful, I think we can actually help make our relationships stronger because we both understand that we are individuals, but our marriage is bigger than just us. Like it's about the marriage, not so much as just about us. And so it helps keeps us as a team, because the cool thing about marriage is, and I tell couples this all the time, marriage is so dope that whoever you marry, you have a marital fingerprint that nobody else has, which makes the marriage special. Special. It's just like you being Tanisha. There's no other Tanisha in the world, but when you have a marriage, whoever you marry, you create something that no other married couple can create. It might look similar, but it's not the same. It has its own fingerprint. And I think that's the beauty behind it. For my wife and I, we both have businesses, right? She started her business last year. I've been doing this for a while, but it gives us our individuality. So if that answers your question or not, I don't know. I was rambling.
No, I think you're spot on where it's like you still can come together as a unit, but you have your own, individual strengths that you're kind of culminating to your marriage or bringing together in your marriage. But I think